light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Someone asked if I would address the subject of depression on the show, and I'm happy to do that, but I just want everyone to understand that I'm addressing this from the perspective of pastoral counseling and as a human being with common sense, not as a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist, a medical practitioner of any sort. There are so many different kinds of depression to take into consideration. The two main categories seem to be, but even there I find the lines kind of blurry, seem to be those that are chemical imbalances and those that are situational. The thing to remember is that each human body is a complex combination of systems and chemicals, and as we experience different emotions, even as we experience different beliefs, it affects which chemicals are released into our bloodstreams and which chemicals are released in our brains, and how memories are stored in the brain as specific chemical combinations. And that if one has lots and lots of negative memories, that means a particular chemical profile in the brain, if there are that many negative memories, that after a while the brain might be overloaded with whatever chemical or enzyme corresponds to negative memories. That could not logically lead to a healthy brain or a healthy person. And yet, for whatever reason, some people have very troubled and difficult lives. The amazing thing, I suppose, is that individuals have survived so many horrific things that they have. People who have been tortured, whether in war situations or criminal situations. Kids who grow up going through school who were teased incessantly in the early years of school, and finding later in life that the bullying that happened to them put certain memories and certain chemicals in their brains that is still affecting them later in life. Those recollections of dealing with bullies that still affect how they respond to people, that still affect the ways that they initiate or don't, or accept responsibility or don't, or respond with an open welcoming attitude or with a suspicious paranoid attitude, as if they're still worried that someone's about to hurt them, or if they conceive of the world as a trustworthy and welcoming and loving place. These things get programmed into us by the things that we go through, but not just by the things that we go through, also how we respond to them. Because there have been people who have been through horrible circumstances, and some of them come out replicating those circumstances and replicating that brokenness in others. People who get bullied and they become bullies. And on the other hand, people who become bullies and for whatever reason become the heroes, become the person who acts against bullying, the person who is a trailblazer to better interrelational patterns, better ways of doing things. The one who becomes the champion of the cause, the rape survivor who starts an organization to help all other rape survivors recover from being raped and accomplishes great good. The person who grew up in poverty that was so debilitating that they dedicate their lives to eradicating poverty in their community, in their nation, in their world. Why does one person respond one way and one person respond the other way? I don't know if science or the medical profession or psychology or anyone has really pinned down for certain why one person responds one way and one responds another. It does seem that to some degree we have a choice about how we respond. To whatever degree we are able to choose, if we take those resources and grab them and hang on to them and utilize them as much as we can, I believe we do have the ability to push our lives in positive directions. We may not be able to determine how much adversity we encounter, how many bullies we have to fight with, but we can push our lives in positive directions by developing the coping skills, by writing about it or reporting it or creating some way that the cycle can be broken and not be ongoing, some way to prevent there ever being another bully or a victim of whatever it was that one experienced. I remember many years ago on a temporary assignment for a day labor employment agency going to this particular building site in December, I believe it was. And our job, because they had started building this building in the middle of winter, or at the beginning of winter, and hadn't enclosed it yet, there was snow all over the building site, and we had to shovel the snow off the building site so that the construction workers could get back to work on the building. And one of the other men who was there that day, he and I got to talking about beliefs and such. I don't know how it is that I so easily wind up with deep discussions with virtually anyone I meet, but he mentioned that he was an atheist, and I asked him what he used as the basis for his moral distinctions, how he decided what was right and what was wrong. And he said the first measure that he used was anything that had been done to him that hurt. If it was done to him and it hurt, he automatically decided that that was something that shouldn't be done to anyone, that was something that was clearly wrong. He didn't need an elaborate theological system to tell him how to be kind and good and to take a stand against oppression and bullying and all of the horrible things that can be done in the world. And I found that a rather fascinating perception to contemplate. Bringing all that to the subject of depression, the challenge that we're faced with in that is, okay, I'm a person who has stored every bad thing that has happened to me in memories or experience. Maybe I have scars on my body of some sort. That's one thing. And as far as the overall picture of depression. On a lighter note, someone assigned Sigmund Freud's name to it. And the speculation is that no, it really wasn't something that Freud ever said, but it was, the basic point was, if you're going to be depressed about something, the first thing you have to determine is whether or not you're simply surrounded by bad people. And in that sense, if depression is environmentally caused, the first challenge one has is, how do I change my environment? How do I get away from the things that are telling me I'm a bad person, that are telling me that I can't be what I find myself to be? I mean, I look in the mirror and I find myself to be a gay man, and someone says to me, well, you could never be a gay man. God hates gay and lesbian people. And if I believe that person, that would give me a reason to be depressed. It would be a belief that would be going against the truth that I find within myself. I don't think God is at war with truth, though. I think God is aligned with truth, and when we find the truth, we come one step closer to God. But in this person saying to me, you can't be that because that can't possibly be true, what that person is communicating to me is their personal truth, which may not be true for me. Is it true for them that being gay is bad? Well, as long as they hang on to that theology, I guess that's a choice that they've made, but I don't know that God would necessarily back up that choice. Someday we'll have to ask God and see what God has to say on the matter. In terms of dealing with depression, though, the first challenge is to say, is this something that is coming to me from somebody else? That somebody in his or her limited human experience is trying to tell me what the truth of me is, and unless they were sitting there when God created me, they have no way of knowing. They've never been inside my head. They haven't been through my experiences. Does it mean I'm special and I'm somehow above them? Well, I don't know if I'm that special, but I guess on that note, I'm very fond of the author Barbara Scher's comment that maybe we all think we're special, and maybe we all are. Each of us is clearly unique at the very least. In feeling depressed, sometimes it's the context we're in that there's too much negative, discouraging, judgmental stuff happening around us. And what we really need is a new set of friends. Or in some cases, what we really need is a new family. If it's a new family, and if one is not a young adult who can move out of the home, though, it becomes, children get depressed too. If they're in a family that is not nurturing them, that's a reason for being depressed. They don't, in my humble, non-professional opinion, they don't need a new drug. What they need is a new family. And sometimes that can be accomplished by bringing the whole family into a counseling situation where they finally get to understand and communicate with each other and to love each other as perhaps they never have before. That may be one option for addressing that kind of environmental depression. When one is in a depressed state, from my own experiences and from others I've talked with, it's this total lack of energy, this not wanting to do anything, this not believing that anything good could happen. And I guess in some sense we need to be there for each other during those times, but not in the sense of grabbing somebody by the wrist and dragging them to the nearest hospital and slamming some drug into their system. That would be for a doctor to determine. For the friends and family, to me it would begin with talking with the person, with knowing the person enough to know, is this something they experience frequently? Or is this something, maybe they're depressed because they're angry about some particular situation and they can't do anything about it. And I'm not sure if there's anything more depressing than being faced with a problem and feeling totally powerless to respond to it, to do anything about it, or to make it stop. Sometimes, well, the old saying says it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to do a lot of things. I would say it takes a village for any individual to get through life. There are, for lack of a better word, normal events in life. As a child, we had pets, we had kittens and puppies. The understanding that I had to develop is that because of the life cycle of a puppy, the life cycle of a kitten, and the life cycle of a human being, there is a really, really good chance that I'm going to outlive every dog or cat I may ever own. Which means there will be the joy of, oh my goodness, a new puppy, he's so loving, he's got so much energy, he's so wonderful. And at some point there will be the sad goodbye, where my dog has reached an age that he simply can't live any longer. My Old English sheepdog died when he was 9 years old. That's a senior citizen for a sheepdog. There was no way, at the last minute, when we were talking with the veterinarian whom I trusted, and she said, well, what do you want? What do you want? And I said, I want him to live forever. I want him to be happy. I want him to be as I remember him always. And I know I'm not going to get that because it's not what his body is designed to do. So there was a sad goodbye, and there was a period of depression, being depressed, and how do I process his passing? How do I process this loss? And that's where sometimes religions are helpful, because over thousands of years, religions have developed rituals for processing grief. And if you don't do the ritual of grief, it's hard to ever get that grief out of your heart and let it go, so that you can remember all the beautiful times and the love and not be buried by the loss and the grief and the parting. Because the parting was a few hours out of the 9 years that I had with my dog, and it was a very wonderful, wonderful 9 years. I don't want to judge the 9 years by the last few hours. That would be so out of balance, so wrong, and it wouldn't. I don't think he would want me to remember him that way either. The other thing, which I'm really not enough of a scientist to say one way or the other, but I think it's the sort of thing that warrants investigation, that warrants questioning, that warrants having dialogues and discussion with knowledgeable professionals, is to what extent some of the chemical imbalances that bring on depression are, in a sense, chemically or environmentally created. Within the current age, it seems to me that people have gotten in the habit, if you will, perhaps encouraged by pharmaceutical companies that always want to sell you another pill. You know, whatever it is, we have a pill for that, we have a pill for that, we have a pill for that. And of course the person says, which pill is right for me? And that's where we go to the doctor and hope that the doctor will prescribe the one that we really need and not the one that they're being bribed by the pharmaceutical company to prescribe. I went to a doctor's appointment recently for something that was wrong with one of my eyes, and I found it a little puzzling at the end where the particular doctor was kind of conversationally flailing. It was as if, and I felt sorry for him, because it was as if he felt like he was supposed to write me a prescription, but he didn't have anything to write me a prescription for because I was healthy. And I just had to assure him 2 or 3 times, no, you don't have to write me a prescription. If nothing is needed and I'm healthy, then you don't need to write me a prescription. But as I left the room, he almost looked sad, as if he felt like he hadn't done his job because he hadn't written me a prescription. I'm using from a certain perspective, but the point of the medical profession, ideally, is to make people healthy, not to keep people sick so that they will keep buying more prescriptions. When it comes to depression, there are drugs that have proven somewhat helpful, but they vary in their effectiveness from one person to another, and they vary from time to time over time. So what worked last year may need a different dosage or may need a different substitution this year. When one decides to use those kinds of answers, that's when the dialogue with the doctor has to be ongoing and ongoing and ongoing and ongoing for as long as the drug is there. And my personal opinion, just my little non-professional 2 cents, is that natural solutions are better than pharmaceutical solutions, but pharmaceutical solutions are better than no solution at all. But because the whole area is so complicated, and a human body is such a complicated thing, and there are new advancements happening all the time, we have seen a development of homeopathy in the last few decades that is a whole different approach to medicine that is specifically focused on being healthy rather than on maintaining sickness or alleviating symptoms. It's kind of oriented towards symptoms, but I'm not the homeopath, so I can only say what my perceptions are from a distance. The point is that we are blessed to live within an age when there are a lot of alternatives to investigate. And rather than, that doesn't mean you have to be overwhelmed, it just means there's always something else to check out. There's always another part of the conversation to have, but we have to be responsible for initiating that conversation, because the particular doctor or medical practitioner with whom we're dealing may not necessarily feel the same compulsion. I mean, they're seeing dozens, if not hundreds of people today, and you're one face and person that is going by in a blur with one set of symptoms, and the next person will have a different set of symptoms. And the one who has the most at stake in whatever happens to you is you. Knowing that depression is a normal part of life, that grief and loss happen from time to time. And before I forget again, the one quote I always like to include when it comes to the subject of grief is my favorite quote from the movie Christmas Eve, starring Loretta Young. in which she advised someone that tears are God's way of melting a heart that is frozen in grief. And so when she got to experiencing a point of loss over her mother's death and she was able to cry, it was the way that she was able to let go of her grief and to move on with her life. And when we censor ourselves and don't let the grief come out and don't let the emotion happen and don't do the mourning of whatever loss has occurred, it gets stuck inside of us. It's like our heart gets frozen in grief and can't let go. I've heard at least one person suggest that depression is anger that is frozen inside of us and it can't get out. It has nowhere to go, and so it locks up inside of us and becomes this heavy rock that won't move, and this weight that we drag around until it holds us down. Whatever it is that we might be angry about, we have to find out what it is, and then we have to find a constructive way of addressing it. The really good thing about anger is that it can give you phenomenal energy to address something. But you need to apply wisdom to address it in a constructive way. Because, well, the example mentioned earlier, because the rape survivor is angry about having been raped, he or she, it happens to both genders, he or she can take that anger at the one who raped them and put it toward working relentlessly to establishing a rape survivors organization and support group. And people ask them, why are you doing this? Why are you working so hard to make this succeed? And they would say, because I remember what it was like, because I remember how I felt, because I remember how angry I was that there was no one to protect me, that there was no one who would believe me, who would listen to me, who would just sit with me while I waited for my tangled emotions to sort themselves out. I'm told with depression, and in my own experience of depression as well, there's a great tiredness that settles over the person. And it may be because of all the energy of holding back some anger that I didn't want to address. Whatever it is, it may be my body telling me it's time to rest because we have some difficult stuff to process. And it may be that if I go take a nap, in some cases, I will have a dream about the very thing that I'm struggling with. And I'll wake up and sit up in bed and go, now I know what I should do. Why did it take me 3 weeks to come up with this? I don't know, but I've been feeling depressed for 3 weeks. I just had a dream, or even if I didn't have a dream, I woke up and somehow in the first few minutes of being awake again, a thought pops into my head, and I don't know where it came from. And it was exactly what I needed to start moving past whatever had me stuck. On one hand, we need to be gentle with ourselves. If we're feeling depressed, it means we need nurturing. Drugs may be helpful, but use them as a bridge, not as an end in themselves. It's not, I don't have to deal with it because I took the drugs. It's, I take the drugs so that I can deal with it, so that I can address what is out of balance, what is repressed, what is wrong in my life. Whether it's, there may even be chemical balances that can be reestablished through proper diet and nutrition. If one is eating a diet that is heavy in sugars and fats, and anyone would agree that this is a very unhealthy diet, don't be surprised if a whole lot of emotional and psychological problems follow along too. A human being is a holistically integrated, complex mystery. We have thoughts which produce chemicals in the brain. We have emotions which produce chemicals throughout our bodies. We have beliefs which tell us how to think and create those. Everything is so integrated, and it's like a row of dominoes. A belief that creates a thought, that creates a feeling, that creates a chemical in the bloodstream. And it's all interconnected. Spirit, mind, and body, all interconnected. To create a holistically healthy person, we have to address all of them. We can't just pull one domino out of the string and decide that everything is going to be fine. If there is something toxic in our hearts, in our minds, in our lives, and we don't address it, we may as well be standing on top of a pile of uranium. The radiation is going to kill us. We have to address these things. We have to be honest with ourselves. Rest if you need to. Act when you can. If you have a friend who is wrestling with a difficult challenge, something that would make anyone angry, but they're not being angry, they're being depressed. Maybe they haven't been able to access their anger about it yet. Maybe they haven't found the energy of that anger to begin to act and to use that energy like fuel to drive them forward and get the job done. Sometimes when my first dachshund died, I think it took me about 2 months before I was able to process all the grief that went with that. And there were several different things that I did attempting to process that. Sometimes I would rest. I did a creative project of framing a large photograph of me with him. I took a journey. I took a walk through the woods. I talked to God. I talked to my deceased dachshund and had the conversation because we didn't have an adequate time to say goodbye. Was I only talking to myself? Was I only talking to the air? Does it really matter if it helped me process the grief and the emotion? I don't know that beliefs have to be theologically true in order to be empowering. I don't know that we even have to believe that they're anything more than a whimsical imagination if it's something that allows us to work through whatever it is that's weighing us down.